Hello, I'm Grace Trafton of The Better Part. Research has shown that treatment courts have the potential of increasing public safety as well as save taxpayers' money. Stay tuned and find out all about this important program that you may never have heard of before. Our guest today, George Chadwick, holds a bachelor's degree from Yale University and a law degree from Santa Clara University. Before, during, and after law school, Mr. Chadwick worked for large civil litigation firms. Since 1990, he has been a member of the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, where he prosecuted sexual assault cases and career criminals. For the past 10 years, he has been the district attorney for treatment court. Welcome to our program, George.
Thank you, Grace.
When I told people that I wanted to do a show on treatment court, everybody said, "What is treatment court?" So now, George, is your big opportunity to tell us exactly what is treatment court.
Or the general principle behind it is that for some people who commit offenses, there's an underlying diagnosis. And this could be severe drug addiction, it could be mental illness. In the Veterans Court that I staff, it could be post-traumatic stress disorder caused by multiple deployments overseas. And individuals are identified by the criminal trial courts as possibly having an underlying diagnosis like this, so that if it's treated through the criminal justice system, the chances that they will reoffend, their recidivism, can be greatly reduced, and the rest of their lives be much more productive.
Now, did treatment court used to be called drug court?
It used to be called drug treatment court. We still have several drug courts in our county, and those address just drug addiction. Drug treatment court was for the people whose drug addiction was so severe that they failed the drug courts.
Oh.
And drug treatment court, which was just one courtroom, had the resources and the grant money and the staffing to give very intensive treatment and intensive supervision to those people. That was a long time ago. Judge Stephen Manley, who has been the treatment court judge for many years, decided to add a mental health component to it, where one afternoon a week we would do the same thing with the mentally ill. That component has overtaken the entire program, so that there isn't a single half day that goes by where we aren't dealing with mentally ill offenders. And the simple drug treatment court has gone by the wayside. We have a lot of substance abuse in our program, but the mental health emphasis has overtaken the drug emphasis, and the drug courts do a really good job now of using some of the same philosophies that the drug treatment court started out using.
Now, is there an overall theory behind treatment court?
The overall theory is that if these underlying issues particular to a particular defendant are treated and addressed, and that their crimes are viewed from the point of view of why they are doing this, then their chances of reoffending will go way down. And treatment courts have been shown to be most effective with the most high-risk offenders. And so when you reduce their criminality, it's not to do this person a favor. It also protects the public, because it causes that person to commit fewer serious assaults, serious robberies, and everybody benefits from that. And I have seen miracles happen where they become productive, tax-paying members of society. They've been barred from seeing their children. They become productive parents again. Not in every case, but I have seen miracles where what we started with, it would be very difficult to imagine an outcome like that. So that's the theory behind treatment court. There are exceptions to that rule. We are sent people sometimes that just can't be helped, but that's the overall theory.
Now, who is the target population? Are there several target populations?
Every single defendant in Santa Clara County who appears before a court is eligible to come to our court. And the 70 other judges in our county are educated as to what to look for as to whether someone's appropriate for our court. We don't get speeding tickets, we don't get minor offenses, and we don't get people who are facing life in prison. But everybody in between, if the judge in the criminal trial court sees an underlying problem, the judge can refer that person to our court for an evaluation to see what would happen if that judge were to send that person to our court. Then it returns to that judge makes a decision, the case resolves, and then the person's sent to us after the case is already resolved in the criminal court. We do not prosecute cases directly.
I see.
In theory, we take people who've already been tried or pled guilty, been sentenced, and finished most or all of their sentence, and are now on probation or parole.
Now, does it work for everybody? It must not be 100%, no matter how well it works, right?
It's not 100%. We had a success rate of 80%.
That's a big success rate.
Well, there are two kinds of success. One is measurement of recidivism. Do they reoffend in the next year or several years afterwards? Mm-hmm. I don't have any knowledge of those statistics. When I say success, it's people who successfully graduate from our program, who've completed all the treatment, and the team as a whole feels that this person's ready to move on. That doesn't mean they won't reoffend. That figure, I believe, has dropped down into the 70s. And the reason why is, in my personal biased prosecutor opinion, twofold. We're being sent very violent offenders with many violent offenses in their past, some of whom aren't necessarily amenable to treatment, and some of whom, even if we do our best to treat the mental illness, they're still going to reoffend. But the other courts don't know what to do with them other than send them to treatment court or send them to prison. There's nothing in between those two things for these violent offenders. Another reason is we are handling a lot more domestic violence cases. And a domestic violence offender, in my personal biased prosecutorial opinion, may have an underlying drug addiction or mental illness, but also has whatever caused this person to abuse people who are weaker physically than he is. And that's something that is not directly treatable with mental health treatment or drug treatment. And so those people tend to reoffend more than someone who robs a bank to buy his meth, for example. If he stops using meth, he's not going to need to rob a bank again.
Can you give us some examples of the benefits that people can receive by participating in this court?
The benefits are supposed to be tied to their greatest need. Housing is a serious problem in possibly every large city in the country. I only know about San Jose. And the homeless problem overlaps with the mental illness issue and overlaps with some other things. If we could give every homeless person in Santa Clara County a roof over their head, miracles would happen. The other kinds of treatment that they'd be required to do are so much easier to do when they have a roof over their head and a bus pass so they can get to these places. We can't give everybody housing, and we can't give everybody free transportation in Santa Clara County, but we do with the people with the greatest need. And even then, we wish we could do more. Other benefits that they get are mental health treatment, and some of the programs are simply seeing the court psychiatrist for medication. Other programs are entire wraparound programs. For example, Full Service Partnership, FSP, helps with housing, helps with drug treatment outpatient, helps with transportation, helps with the doctor, the psychiatrist who is actually part of the FSP program, medication, job searches, getting Social Security benefits, just about everything. If we had more taxpayer money and could give everybody those benefits, we would have even more success. Now, at some point, people may react, why are we giving all this free stuff to people who have committed crimes? I have two responses to that. besides agreeing with some of the principle behind that, especially as a prosecutor. Number one is because it helps everybody else in the county. But number two is these particular people have been identified as people where if they receive this treatment, these particular people are much less likely to reoffend. We don't give every criminal on probation free housing, free medical care, free, et cetera, et cetera. It's targeting the root causes of these people's criminality in order not only to help this person, but in a larger scale, it benefits the community in the ways I've already talked about. So that's an overview of some of the benefits that are available, and there's actually even more than that. I'm not directly involved in the treatment that goes on outside of the courtroom, but we talk about it with every client every time they come to court. This is the treatment you were supposed to do. Did you do it?
Now, do they have to come back to court to check with you periodically?
Very, very important part of the program is that they come back for what are called reviews.
Oh.
And if they're in custody because they got caught with some methamphetamine again, we see where they are at, whether they're serving a new jail sentence, whether they're mentally unstable because they got off their medication and that's why they committed the new offense. We address that, and when they're ready to be released, we decide whether they continue in the program they're already doing, but unsuccessfully, that's why they're in custody, or whether we need to start with a whole new program. For example, a higher level of care, different housing.
Well, explain to me what the differences are between the jail and the prison.
Well, my view of jail has changed dramatically because of my work in treatment court, and I see jail as a treatment tool more than as a punishment. And criminal justice in general is starting to see it that way. If someone commits certain offenses, felonies or misdemeanors, rather than going to prison if it's a felony, they're given probation, which means we're giving you a break, but we're watching you. We're not going to send you to prison, we're going to put you on probation. Sometimes a newspaper will just say those words. But as part of probation, one of the terms of probation can be up to 12 months jail. And so that's somebody who's gone to jail, and they've served their sentence, but now they're on 3 years probation. If they violate probation, they can then be sent to prison. And that is the heart of our program, are people on probation, where if they fail our program, they can end up in prison, or under some of the new laws, something very close to prison. So that's the stick that's hanging over their head while they get the carrot of graduation and the treatment that the court provides.
Now, I understand that there's different kinds of treatment courts. Could you tell us about that?
First, may I explain who the people are in the courtroom in order to explain that?
Okay.
There are in the courtroom, unlike other courtrooms, a lot of people. There's the judge, there's a special court probation officer who is experienced in treatment court. There are at least 2, usually 3 mental health professionals in the court who do the evaluations of the defendants. Some of them actually do some therapy treatment too, but they're there to monitor how their mental health treatment outside of the court is going. And they're also the experts who assess what does this individual need for mental health treatment, where can we put them where we're going to have the most success given the resources available. Then you have the defense attorney. There's a public defender, and because we're dealing with a mostly indigent population, the vast majority of the defendants in our courtroom have public defenders. There are private attorneys on those cases where the defendant can afford a private attorney. And on our special calendars, finally getting around to answering your question, we have a veterans court, which I'm the most proud of. I've spent dozens and dozens of hours taking classes and trainings in veteran post-traumatic stress disorder in Washington, D.C. I'll be going back there for my 3rd year this summer. And that is twice a month. And these are veterans who, because of their service to our country, what they experience as part of that service has damaged them. Everybody's heard about how in Vietnam, when they were over there were a lot of drugs. And
Right.
a lot of those service people came back addicted.
Right.
That's an example. There's also something called complex trauma. And that's because the new deployments, which didn't happen in Vietnam as much, where somebody goes to Afghanistan or Iraq, serves our country, very sudden, unexpected, traumatic things happen. They come back here, they try to heal from the post-traumatic stress. While they're in that process, they're sent back for another deployment and another one. And this is complex trauma. Complex trauma can also happen in the childhood. That's one of the core areas that Veterans Court and new California criminal laws address. Their service to our country helped cause this situation. We need to address the damage that was done while they were overseas or in combat, or even something that happened in their own barracks. And that's Veterans Court. There's Parole Reentry Court. Parolees, all of them went to prison. Prison's not a good place. However, I did do a tour of San Quentin, and they have wonderful programs in San Quentin. And some of the inmates who are there for life are very helpful, helping the other inmates rehabilitate themselves so that when they get out, they have some skills and they know what kind of treatment to have.
That's good to hear.
And then there's what I call San Andreas Court. This is for the developmentally disabled, autistic, but mostly what we used to call mental retardation. That term has some stigma to it. So it's developmental disability. And San Andreas Regional Center is the organization in our county that treats and educates and houses the developmentally disabled. That is once a month. When any of these specific courts are happening, the personnel in the courtroom change. We have 4 people from Veterans Court come in on Veterans Day. We have 4 people from parole agents come in, and they staff it, and they know what's going on with these cases, and they make recommendations to the court as to what kind of treatment these people get. There are some other specific calendars, but those more have to do with the legal kind of sentencing where the staffing doesn't change.
It sounds like it takes a village.
I would say that sometimes there are 15 people in that courtroom, all of whom are county professionals.
Is that right? That many? Now, are the veterans courts more predominant?
Veterans Court, I was the first prosecutor ever to staff Veterans Court in this county. And it wasn't that long ago. I want to say about 10 years ago. And at that time, Judge Manley was one of the pioneers nationwide. Possibly the first, I don't know, but one of the very first to do it. And it depends on the county. If you're a veteran in Texas and you need treatment, any kind at all, you have to drive 150 miles each way to get a doctor.
My goodness.
From what I've read anecdotally, the veterans treatment in Santa Clara County is excellent, way above the nationwide average. We've read a lot in the newspaper about the VA. I think the VA in this county does a great job, and the VA has several different locations in this county to give the treatment. And when someone's identified as a veteran in the criminal trial courts, I would say the majority of them are being sent to us. So we handle quite a large proportion of the veterans in Santa Clara County who have fallen into the criminal justice system. I don't know the statistics, but I wouldn't be surprised if the number is very high.
Tell me, what role does the prosecutor play, and what role does the judge play?
Well, the judge is the center of everything that happens. We are all there to give the judge our opinions, and the judge decides. What the judge decides is what parts of the treatment that the defendant's going to get are going to be ordered by the court so that if the defendant doesn't do those things, the judge can sanction the person for doing it. And it requires a very wise judge to know when to sanction, which is a word for punish, basically, although the word punishment and treatment court don't go together all that well. It's the same psychological theory as giving a child a timeout. It's a consequence to the action. which is a very necessary part of treatment. And sometimes that consequence will be jail. You're going to spend a month in jail. You didn't go to your treatment. And right now you're off your medication. I'm not going to let you walk around in the streets in this condition. And based on what you've done the past 2 months, I don't trust you to go to treatment. So you're going to go to jail. You're going to write me a letter. What are you going to do differently? And in jail, you're going to get on your medication. And then we'll talk about what's going to happen next. And so the judge has to take into account so many factors, plus everything that judge knows about that person. Some of those people have been coming there for years. They'll graduate from our program, but then a few years later they'll reoffend, and bring all that experience to bear. Judge Manley's possibly the top treatment court judge in the country. I've seen twice where he went to speak at a convention and he got hit with a surprise award. It happens all the time. He had no idea it was coming. He's
wonderful.
Everybody who's involved in treatment court nationwide, I think, has heard of Judge Manley. So he has an irreplaceable wealth of knowledge, not just in court, but also, I hope I'm still answering your question, what he does out of court is very, very onerous. He doesn't tell us about it, he doesn't complain about it, but he is constantly battling in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. about funding, constantly educating about treatment courts. He's being asked all the time to speak nationwide, constantly dealing with problems in our county with the treatment providers that work directly with our court. An illustrative example, there's a residential house that houses 30 defendants on probation who are all in that residential home, which means they're doing well, because if you don't do well, you get kicked out. Mm-hmm. And that residential house closes.
Oh.
We now have 30 people on the street.
Oh.
He gets emails like that several times a week, just about that issue, housing. Then there's another issue, then another issue, then another issue, then another issue. So he has 2 full-time jobs, what he does in court and what he does outside of court. So I'm blessed as a prosecutor because the people I work with are all very, very talented. The mental health professionals, that, especially the 3 ones that see the most often, are just outstanding and very experienced. They don't necessarily agree with each other, and that's wonderful. And then the public defenders, the defense attorneys have been very lucky because they are very experienced not only in treatment court, but also in serious felonies. And they've done serious felony trials. So we can discuss a case very quickly and come to an agreement very, very quickly. And they know when they really need to stand up for their client and when their client really needs help. Maybe needs a little bit of time in jail, because otherwise they're going to commit, if we let them out the door, they're going to commit a crime or get hit by a car, because they're so mentally unstable right now, we can tell. And that requires a very wise, very experienced public defender, and I've been very lucky that that's been my counterpart in treatment court. Otherwise, I'm not even sure how the system would work.
What happens to a person when he or she relapses?
That's a great question, and that's what makes treatment court unique in terms of how the public understands how courts go. In any other court, you get punished. If you don't show up for your test, that's a violation of probation in the drug courts. Although drug court judges are now very educated in the techniques of perhaps not slamming somebody every single time they do something wrong. When a criminal trial court sends a defendant to treatment court, that trial court is tacitly announcing, I want this person handled differently if they relapse than another court would. Relapses are a part of recovery. If you take a long-term methamphetamine addict with a severe problem, if it's not severe, they shouldn't be in our court. And you give them 2 or 3 chances for relapses and then they fail the program, that doesn't work. That's not how drug addiction works. That's not how addicts think. Addicts, their entire limbic system has been hardwired to scream at them, if you stop using methamphetamine, you will die. Where their prefrontal cortex says, don't use the meth, their survival instincts say, you have to use the meth. And you give them 2 or 3 chances, and then they're gone from treatment. That's not how treatment works, and that's not how treatment court works.
Now tell me very briefly, how does treatment court interact with community-based services? It seems like there's lots of services involved.
I don't know how a treatment court starts in a new county in terms of, okay, now we have a treatment court. How are we going to hook up with the community-based services? I have a guess that that's actually a very difficult process. There's this mental health organization that's treating a lot of people in the community. There are people in treatment court. Some of them should go to that mental health service that's always been there. It's a wonderful mental health program. We've never sent someone there before. How do we do it? I think that that's probably a very difficult process. One of the things from a prosecutor's point of view and a public defender's point of view is that mental health organization is not used to reporting to a court, where if they say something bad about the person's performance, that's going to put the person in jail. That can be contrary to the whole treatment concept. So the court needs to educate itself about how to liaison with that mental health program, and that mental health program needs to educate itself about how to deal with a criminal court where the people they're treating are going to go to jail if they screw up to the point where they're a public safety danger. In our treatment court, those liaisons are long established. Department 61, which is the courtroom that is treatment court, if you ever want to visit it, it's open to the public, 201 North 1st Street, the brand new, modern, beautiful courthouse near St. James Park in San Jose. You'll see how many different programs Department 61 works with, but it's taken a long time to get there. I imagine the initial liaison establishing that is a difficult process.
Well, George, thank you so much for telling us about treatment court. We are now better informed. Thank you.
And so am I after my years there. Thank you, Grace.
Our thanks again to George Chadwick for enlightening us on this very worthwhile program. And please be sure to also watch us on YouTube and Roku. See you next time. Bye-bye.